Welcome to our Real Politics podcast channel. Today we have one of our most eagerly awaited guests. Scotty, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Now let's move on to the news. The first thing I'd like to discuss is a statement by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. He says that American ambassadors must leave their posts in Ukraine immediately. What does he mean by that, and how does this threaten our government?
Get out of Kiev because something big is coming. It's a statement of fact. It's not an assessment. Russia is complying with its obligations under international humanitarian law or the law of war. Anybody who knows the law of war understands that if you're about to carry out an attack that may have the potential to, include civilians who might be in the area, that you have a duty and responsibility to provide adequate warning. It's something the United States doesn't do, something Israel doesn't do, but it's something that Russia always does because Russia doesn't target civilian targets. There's collateral damage, there's accidents that happen, but generally speaking, Russia targets only military targets or targets that are legally allowed to be targeted under the law of war. Russia's getting ready to erase the center of Kiev. People need to understand that. Anybody who's been to Kiev, I have, and you've seen these buildings, the architecture, it's beautiful. It's about to be erased. It's about to be eliminated. This is a signal not just to Ukraine about the futility of continuing resistance. This is a signal to Europe, as in Paris, this is you. Berlin, this is you. London, this is you. If you guys want to play stupid games, this is the prize you're about to win. But in order to do this, Russia must comply with the law of war. It's the additional Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions requires adequate warning in advance. There is no specific time attached to this. So, for me to sit here and say it's going to be 24 hours, I don't know that. I don't know what Russia considers to be adequate warning. My guess is that something's going to happen tonight, and it's going to be something that nobody has seen before. I believe a Reshenik will be used, but this time used in a way that is more than just a demonstration. I think the Russians did a demonstration a couple nights ago to the Ukrainians, hit a legitimate target, but just demonstrating what could happen. Zelensky's response was to fire nearly 300 drones into Moscow. They were all shot down, but Zelensky said, we're not done. He's getting ready to launch a major drone campaign in June, backed by the British. He may attempt to strike the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, the largest forum of its type in the world, bigger than Davos, which is convening next week. Russia can't allow this to happen. So Russia is going to erase Kiev. The justification, of course, is the horrific attack carried out by Ukraine together with British and American backing of a teachers' college in Starobelsk in Lugansk. 21 students were murdered, assassinated literally by Ukrainians who had eyes on target. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate act. We have the Starlink antenna. We know that the FP-1 drones were firing rockets that can only be fired when you have eyes on target and somebody is telling them to fire. So there was a Ukrainian with an MI6 controller watching this target, assassinating these sleeping students who woke up, tried to escape, and were murdered in successive waves of FP-1 drones firing air-to-ground rockets and then diving in with their own bombs to flatten, collapse the buildings. Russia, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. Russia has been saying all along that it doesn't want to escalate. It's not seeking escalation. It always looks for the diplomatic option out. It's the United States, it's Europe, and it's Ukraine that have foregone the diplomatic solution. So now Russia is saying, diplomacy is dead. Literally, there will be no resurrecting this. It's done. There's no negotiated outcome. Unconditional surrender is the only outcome, and Russia will continue to erase Ukrainian cities throughout the summer until Ukraine either ceases to exist or surrenders unconditionally. And if Europe wants to get involved, Russia will invite Europe to the party. This is where we're at in this war. It's a very dangerous progression of the conflict, but inevitable given the absolutely irresponsible behavior of Ukraine, Europe, and the United States. You may say that I don't know what I'm talking about. That's your right. But to call me a paid Russian asset's an insult. I was a commissioned officer in the United States Marine Corps, sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution. I've been to war to defend my country, and I would close with and destroy you, the people saying this. So don't push your luck. I'm sorry. I'm sort of in a combative mood right now because I'm very angry that it's gotten to this. This is something that just didn't need to happen. This should have been avoided back in late March, early April, when there was a peace treaty ready to be signed between Russia and Ukraine. But it was the United States and Great Britain that intervened and got the Ukrainians to back out. And it's the United States and Great Britain that has allowed this conflict to go on, so that more than 2 million Ukrainians are dead, 5 million Ukrainians are wounded. The total eradication of the genetic future of Ukraine. It's dead as a society, dead as a nation. It will not survive this. No matter what happens, Ukraine is finished because demographically it can't survive given what has happened to it. This didn't need to happen. And now we're going to see cultural centers, beautiful places of Europe that are going to be destroyed in a way that they didn't have to, but now is a necessity. The strikes that Russia did a couple nights ago were strikes that were related to the drone attack. Again, most people don't know this. They don't understand what happened there. They say, oh, Russia struck a museum. Russia struck a shopping center. Russia struck this. Every one of those places, the Ukrainians have bragged that the FP1 drone the production has been broken down and hidden in schools. Hidden in the basements of museums, hidden in the garages of shopping centers. This is a statement of fact. I'm not speculating. The Ukrainians brag about this. They've actually put out videos where the guys are saying, hey, we're in the school gymnasium building FP1 drones, and they're surprised when the Russians hit it. They say, oh, you hit a school. Well, it's not a school. It's now a defense industrial base. Everything you're showing here, all these targets were involved in the manufacture of FP1 drones. The drones being used to strike Starobelsk Teachers College. And the Russians struck, destroying these and destroying the command centers. It's believed that the Oreshnik was fired against the command center of the drones used to direct the strike. The Russians have a very good intelligence picture of what's going on. They avoid these very kinds of targets because, again, these are targets that, from the visual perspective, don't look good. And so Russia's avoided. But when these places are building drones that are used to murder sleeping student teachers in their dormitory, then Russia has no choice. So they struck it. But these are not national command and control targets. These are targets related to the action on Starobelsk. What Russia's getting ready to do is take out the parliament, take out the presidential administration, take out the defense ministry, take out the major infrastructure of the government of Ukraine. They're going to erase the government of Ukraine, at least the infrastructure. Sure, they'll be evacuated, people will run. It's called shake the tree, people. I've done it for a living. You blow these things up and now they have to relocate. And Russia has good intelligence. As I said, if they know where your secret FP1 production facility is, they're going to know where Zelensky runs to. And eventually you're going to catch up and they're going to kill them. This is a death sentence for Ukraine. Understand that every single member of the Ukrainian government has been indicted in Russia for crimes against humanity, for murder. I want to remind people of the murder that has taken place, documented in Kursk, when the Ukrainians went in at the behest of the United States and Great Britain, invaded and occupied parts of Kursk Oblast. The Ukrainian forces literally murdered hundreds of elderly Russians who couldn't evacuate. Nobody was allowed to live. And they didn't just murder them, they raped them. It's on videotape. The Russian prosecutors have it. They've played it. And the people involved up the kill chain are going to be held to account. And those people include the president of Ukraine, the head of the Ukrainian intelligence service, the minister of defense, the foreign minister. All of the people involved in government have a death sentence hanging over their head. So, ladies and gentlemen, get ready to see something very, very ugly unfold over the course of this summer, the death of a nation.
Some people in the West might believe that this is possible, but most don't. They'll launch a couple more missiles, but it won't be anything special. They've done everything they can, and we saw that in Ukraine.
Look, and I'll admit, again, in your chat, there's people, Ritter, you said they're going to be done in a week. So did the director of the CIA. So did the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So did any military professional, because there was no doubt that if Russia wanted to close with and destroy the Ukrainian army and kill a nation state back in February of 2022, they would have done so. But they didn't want that. What they wanted to do is get Ukraine to the negotiating table and bring it into this conflict through diplomacy, which has always been Russia's go-to move. And Russia succeeded in that. Why do you think Ukraine went to Gomel, Belarus 6 days after the Russians intervened? Because they realized that they were dying. You can say what you want, but the Russians were slaughtering the Ukrainian military. Yes, Russia was taking casualties, but the Ukrainian military was being slapped all over the battlefield and dying in great numbers. And the Ukrainians saw that this was a death sentence, so they went to the negotiating table and they negotiated an end to the war less than a month later. This was the Russian goal and objective. Look at the terms of peace. Russia was turning back all of the territory of Ukraine captured. Russia was not seeking to take the nation. People who say that are liars. They simply are lying, fabricating, because the record is quite clear. But then what happened is the United States and Great Britain intervened and told the Ukrainians, you can't accept this peace deal, and they continued the war. Now the war shifts into another phase, a phase that Russia, frankly speaking, wasn't ready to enter into. And what, now you have to, this is what people don't understand. It's not a war that's being fought on the battlefield up until now. It's a war that's been fought in, the back rooms of banks, in the, in the marketplace. It's an economic war. The total sanctioning of Russia, including its energy, required Russia to undertake dramatic economic measures that are linked. War is an extension of politics by other means, and politics is an extension of the economy. So what Vladimir Putin was doing was managing a very complex situation that required him to balance the needs on the battlefield with the reality of the economy and the reality of Russia's, diplomatic posture abroad. Russia couldn't go in hard at this juncture, or else they could lose the support of China. Wasn't really on board early on. They could lose the support of everybody. But what Russia did is stabilize its economy, then develop effective diplomatic links abroad, building a multipolar response to American hegemony. So today, as we speak, Russia's in an extremely strong diplomatic position, an extremely strong economic position, and on the battlefield, Russia is prevailing. If you think otherwise, you don't know anything about this war. Jerome, you said you're going to talk tactics later, so I'll hold off on that. But the point is, Russia's at a stage now. Up until now, Putin was balancing this. He's avoid escalation because he has a winning formula. He's winning economically, he's winning politically, and at home and abroad, and he's winning on the battlefield militarily, engaging in a protracted a war of attrition where he's literally grinding down not just Ukraine, but the collective West. Why do you think Europe can't build an army today? Because they have no defense industry, because it's empty. Why can't America supply them? Because we've supplied everything. The Russians have ground it up. And then we went on the fast track and getting rid of our reserves by going to war with Iran. But the point is, the West has nothing, literally nothing. The situation that exists today is one where Russia can responsibly escalate without fear of generating, the kind of intervention from the West that Russia would have had trouble dealing with economically and politically. It's war. War is broad spectrum. It's not just the battlefield. Russia could always handle the battlefield, but the problem is the battlefield is linked to economic decisions and political decisions. One of the things that was happening in the lead up to what's about to happen is politically, Russia was being attacked by a very concerted campaign of mental warfare being waged by Great Britain using the Ukrainian proxy, where they were resonating defeatism amongst not just the liberal elite of Russia, which no longer exists, but amongst the supporters of the war, creating the perception that Russia couldn't win the war, that Russia was bogged down, that Putin was indecisive. And this defeatism was sinking in, and it was going to cause a problem. This is why, another reason why Russia must act now, because it must act now decisively to undo the impact of this mental war being waged against it.
Mr. Rosenberg of the BBC says that Russia is preparing large-scale strikes. Should we be concerned about this?
Mr. Rosenberg works for the BBC. We know that you don't work for the BBC unless you've been vetted by MI5. Statement of fact, the British have acknowledged this over and over again. He is a British government agent. Not only that, MI5 is an internal security service. He is an agent of MI6. MI6 controls the British press. Rosenberg has spent the better part of the last year binging off and creating. I talked about mental war, and this is a clear example of it. The mental war that has been waged against Russia has created this very split amongst the experts that's then picked up by Russian media. And there are ways that the British can vector this into the media. Rosenberg's an expert at it. So what we're seeing here is mental warfare playing out in broad daylight. This isn't legitimate journalism going on. This is manipulated journalism through a very sophisticated MI6 operation designed to ask this very question. This very question is a British-generated question projected into Russia. So that's what's going on here. There is no real split Because first of all, that's not the way Russia works. The expert community, what is the expert community? The expert community has no decision-making ability whatsoever and has no political relevance. Ask yourself, how many votes in the State Duma does the expert committee control? What kind of political power do they project into Novosibirsk, for instance, one of the largest industrial places? Do they control the assembly of Novosibirsk? Can they influence policymaking? What is their role in decision making? The answer is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, null across the board. So we're literally talking about people who don't matter, who don't have an impact. They have an advisory capacity, but Putin understands exactly what's going on right now. Believe me, the SVR knows what mental warfare is, and the FSB knows what mental warfare is, and they understand what's transpiring here. So this is a debate generated by the British within Russian society to create the kind of doomsayers in there. But the only vote that matters is the Russian leadership vote. What you're reading in newspapers is irrelevant. That's why Rosenberg is doing this. This is a British game. It's a sophisticated game. It's one that the British have been playing for a long time. And people may say, well, Scott, what do you know? I don't know. Maybe I was involved in Operation Mass Appeal, which is an MI6 operation back in 1998 to inject misinformation into mainstream media, including the British press through British editors and writers. Guys, been there, done that, got the T-shirt. Okay, I know what MI6 is. I know what MI6 does. I was first person seat right there at the table when these decisions were made, and it's happening today. This isn't manufactured stuff, speculation, conspiracy theory. Steve Rosenberg works for MI6, and what you just read is an MI6 operation that has no relevance in the Russian reality.
Putin may be taking these steps right now, precisely because some people were very upset that he hadn't turned up the heat yet. But now it seems he is doing so.
But that's and what Rosenberg's missing, because this is an MI6 generated script, is he's talking about people who don't have a factor. There are people that have a problem. Let me just remind everybody what happened in June of 2023 when Yevgeny Prigozhin mobilized 7,000 Wagner fighters and marched on Moscow. That was done at the behest of the British. The British had told him that they had businessmen in Moscow who were going to rise up and they were going to create a Moscow Maidan where Wagner came in, seized the square, people rose up and demanded the resignation of Shoigu, Gerasimov, and would bring Putin under their control. This was a British operation. It failed, but it happened. So when people say, well, it couldn't happen today, guys, it happened 3 years ago. Literally 3 years ago, almost to the month. This is the danger. Inside Russia, who cares about these civilian advisors? There's a significant body of war veterans, Wagner veterans, paratrooper veterans, people who have fought in this conflict, lost loved ones in this conflict, who are saying we need to win this damn war. And they're frustrated that they're not winning. The mental war, again, this attack on this school was a deliberate act done by the British, because if Putin didn't react to this, it would resonate deeply, and you could see possibly another repeat of June 2023 happening in June 2026. Again, for the people out there saying, what are you talking about? It happened, guys. It already happened. So to pretend it couldn't happen again is absurd. And the danger of it is that you have this event that has resonated deeply with the Russian people. Putin has no choice but to take action right now, because otherwise he plays into the narrative that is being promoted by the British in the minds of the Russian people. Not these people that are quoted in newspapers. They don't matter. They're not the ones that are going to be marching on Moscow and assembling in the square. This matters with the right-wing nationalist people who want this war to be won. And they are demanding that this war be won. And I think now the Russian government understands that the old way of doing business is no longer viable, that it is time for escalation to manage not only the conflict on the ground, but the conflict at home.
NATO is currently striking a direct blow against Russia by supplying it with weapons. Is that part of what's also driving Putin to what may be coming later tonight?
Yes, because again, the attack that took place at Starobelsk College was an attack carried out by the British. The Ukrainians are the proxy. But they're using drones. FP Firepoint is a company that's people Google it and look into it. It's run by a female grifter who has no background whatsoever. It's a front company so that the British can say the Ukrainians are producing indigenous drones, but it's not. This is all British managed, et cetera. Britain is a NATO country. But we see, for instance, the Germans saying we are preparing for war with Russia. The French, we are preparing for war with Russia. The British, we are preparing for war with Russia. We want war with Russia. It's inevitable we will be fighting war with Russia. They're talking about building weapons, long-range strike weapons to strike Russia. I mean, how long does Russia have to sit there and go, well, geez, they're saying it and they're doing it? I mean, FP5 Flamingo is a British-built weapon that is being launched from Ukrainian territory into the Russia's strategic depth. The British are launching their weapons from Ukraine into Russia's strategic depth. This is unsustainable. NATO is at war with Russia. NATO intelligence, again, probably a good thing I'm not a Russian, despite what everybody says in your chat, because if I was, every single one of these American and British intelligence assets would be shot down because they're actively collecting intelligence that's being used to target Russia's strategic depth. They are parties to the conflict, but Putin has been deliberately avoiding escalation. But the bottom line is now that we're getting into the erasure of Ukraine, the next step is to get rid of the nations that are facilitating Ukraine's drone strikes. The first step is to get rid of the Baltic corridor. Right now, Ukraine is launching drones that go through Poland, through the Baltic corridor, and strike in the vicinity of St. Petersburg. The Baltic corridor will be shut down. There's a big meeting right now of European Union and NATO members in the Baltics to talk about this very thing. They're talking about supporting them, but I also think they're talking about making sure that the Ukrainians cease and desist because they understand that a red line has been crossed. There will be a Russian strike against Latvia. I mean, Narishkin, the head of the SVR, has published 7 or 8 targets, which he says we have the intelligence that proves these are Ukrainian operating bases. We will not allow this to happen. If Ukraine strikes the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum next week, launched through the Baltic corridor, then you're going to see Latvia be erased. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It will be erasure of a Baltic state, a NATO member. And there's not a damn thing NATO can do about it because for all their talk about building this, building that, the reason why they're talking about building this and building that is because they have nothing. NATO has nothing today, zero capacity to do anything. Moreover, their talk is empty rhetoric because they lack the industrial foundation to build up because of sanctions, et cetera, from end use. You can't go from 0 to 60 when you have 0. 0 to 60 implies you have a machine that has a gas pedal, you hit the gas. They don't have a machine. They don't have a gas pedal. They don't even have the gas. That's an important thing. They don't have the gas. The British are, all their tough talk, they're saying, well, we hate Russia. We can't empower, but we're going to ease up on the sanctions right now because we need that Russian aviation fuel to keep British Airways flying this summer. Really? You don't think Lufthansa needs the same thing? You don't think Air France needs the same thing? They're all dying right now economically because of the energy shortage brought on, and they need Russian energy. They're lucky that Russia, continues to sell them energy.
We have just received information that Putin is preparing a ground strike by Oreshnik against Ukrainian command centers in Kiev. I believe the U.S. must respond to this immediately. We must not let our guard down. Russia could cross the line at any moment.
Yeah, I would advise people to be very careful about it. I mean, you're 100% right in terms of the perception. But providing, M777s to Ukraine was considered, a red line. Didn't want to cross. They crossed it and they're all dead now. Ukraine doesn't have any M777s left. Russia killed them all. HIMARS, very ineffective weapon. Russia's killed it or solved it, can't shoot it. Not ATACMS. No one talks about ATACMS anymore. No one talks about Scalp. No one talks about Storm Shadow. No one talks about F-16s, which just get shot out of the sky every time they take off. No one talks about any of these weapon systems because even though Russia had a red line, every time they were crossed, Russia had a solution to it. Russia is winning this war hands down, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very hard war, very difficult war. The drone aspect of it is unreal. People go down to Pokrovsk and take a look at what's happening in Pokrovsk. Imagine a modern battlefield. You normally think that, I know you and I fought a war where when we speak of company online, we got 170 dudes, 136 dudes spread out, platoon formation, squads moving forward. They don't fight like that. They go forward in 2s and 3s, more 6 at the most, infiltrating in with drone coverage, artillery coverage. You dig in with 15 guys, but then these 2 guys come up, 2 guys against 15, but the 15 can't get out of the bunker because they get pummeled with drones. They have their own drones coming in, so the 2 guys have to be careful. And this is the kind of war, very slow, methodical war that Russia's winning. They're grinding them down. They're killing literally thousands of Ukrainians a day, ladies and not thousands of Russians. Trust me, thousands of Ukrainians a day are being slaughtered. The Pokrovsk battle cost them 60 to 80,000 dead. They're about ready to lose 100,000 in the Slavyansk-Kramatorsk battles. This is real stuff. This is a slaughter that's taking place. And the West has ignored this, but every red line has been managed by Russia effectively on the battlefield, which is why they're winning. But from a perception standpoint, the West got lulled into a false sense of complacency. We can continuously escalate. Ladies and gentlemen, what I told you before about mental war is an escalation that goes outside of the traditional definition of what the battlefield is. The battlefield has now been extended into the Russian domestic political sphere and is resonating. It's a different battlefield. It's a different concept, and Russia will not allow this to stand. So yes, it's changing now. And Russia is going to do things that are unimaginable, but we won't have to imagine it in 24 to 48 hours. You'll see it. I think you're going to see the erasure of Kiev.